Good evening, everyone. It is November 18, 2019, and we are back testing the Focal Clear against other headphones. We just completed the whole Focal Clear sound test by itself, and now we're comparing it to three headphones. And the headphone that we're going to compare it to today is the HD700 from Sennheiser. We've already done the bass comparison between these two, so we're just going to concentrate on the mids today. We have three songs queued for our test. We have Heartbreak by Chris Serro. We have Sun by Sleeping at Last. And we have Tomorrow by Daughter. And you can find the timestamps for all of these in the description section below. I currently have both headphones connected to an A/B switch, and that switch itself is connected to the Monolith THX AAA desktop amplifier. And we are going to start the test right now. And we're going to start with Heartbreak. Here we go. I currently have the clear on my head. And very clean sound. There's no distortion. We are at negative 30 decibels. We're going to increase. We're going to come up to negative 25. And as I've said about the clear many times, the tonality of the headphone does not change as you increase the volume, as you provide more power to the driver. Indeed, it stays the same. The tonality stays the same. It's just that the volume increases, which is exactly what you want a headphone to do. It should perform just the same no matter what volume setting you're on. That's a very good driver when it's able to do that. I'm going to increase to negative 20. Now, I could hear each vocalist very clearly. I hear the backup vocalist echoed in the background, and it's not like muted. It actually sounds like they're right behind me, maybe 4 or 5 steps. And then I have the primary vocalist right up front. And now I have the bass, which is fairly tight, fairly well controlled. Now, with this song, the bass can overpower the mids very easily if you have any headphones that are boosted in the bass. And I can say that I don't hear a distortion. The mids and the bass aren't melding. They're bumping up shoulders, but I can still hear the vocalist clearly. The reverberation of the bass is very fast. It's in quick transients. The electric guitar is crystal clear without being harsh. I can hear the bass guitar, and I can hear 3 vocalists. There's a backup vocalist that's just singing in the background somewhere. And then I can hear each vocalist left and right. You can actually hear a slight differences in the tonality left and right if you pay attention. The vocals are very smooth. In fact, if I were to say how I would rate this, female vocalists tend to have a bit of harshness to their voice because they can be a little too energetic. They can have a lot of energy, especially the treble area. Now, this can be explained, the smoothness, either through the mixing and mastering process, that it's been processed down, the harshness has been rolled off, or it's just a headphone is rolling that off a little bit. Regardless, it's very smooth experience. I'm going to increase the volume to negative 15. Tonality has not changed. So we went from negative 30 to negative 15. We've increased by 15 decibels. And the sound is the same as it was at negative 30, just louder. Okay, so let's bring this back down to negative 30. And we're going to switch to the HD700. Okay, I got the 700 on my head, and the first thing you'll notice very immediately is that the 700 isolates outside noise basically none. Whereas the clear, it doesn't isolate because it's an open back design, but it isolates a lot better than the HD700, which is not made of metal. It doesn't have thick ear pads. It doesn't have a whole lot of clamping force. It's very light, so there's a lot that goes into it. But the isolation is essentially not there. Okay, so let's restart this song with the 700. Here we go. And at -30, it sounds more muted. It's less volume from the headphone than it was through the clear. The clear, I would say, was noticeably louder at -30 than the HD700 is. I'm going to increase to -25. And -25 brings it up just a tiny bit, so we're going to increase again to -20. And -20 is essentially what -25 was for the clear. So now I'm going to increase to -15. And that's a lot clearer. -15 is not that same -15 as on the clear. The clear's -15 response was much louder. So I would say that the HD700 is easily 5 decibels quieter compared to the clear. The mids are clear, but there's a bit of muddiness. The separation of the vocals is not as obvious as it was on the clear. Now, the HD700 is not known for bass, so that should be a good thing. But the problem is that the electric guitar and the bass guitar are overpowering the mids, so it's becoming harder to hear the mids, the vocals. The clear presented the vocals absolutely clear. The 700 is not that. The 700 actually has a more blended response. And by blended, I mean that the mids and the bass is not just rubbing shoulders. The bass is overpowering the backup vocalist, so I can't hear her. And the electric guitar is so loud in comparison to the mids that even with increased volume, I can't hear the mids clearly. I can hear the electric guitar frequency. I can't hear the mids frequency. I mean, it's there. It's obvious. It's just not clear, and certainly not clear as the vocals. And it's absolutely obvious that the electric guitar frequency, the treble energy is increased, and it's above the mids when everything is playing together. It's a very different experience compared to the clear. All right, so let's stop. So I don't have to do this for very long because I can tell you right now that the tonality of both these headphones is night and day different. I really do like the HD700 for everything that they are, but I have to tell you that if you do a head-to-head comparison, for this song, the clear presents the mids much more separated. It's easier, so much easier to separate the multiple vocalists. It's easier to hear the backup vocalist, whereas on the 700, the backup vocalist is basically non-existent. And the second vocalist, when they should be, primary vocalist, secondary vocalist, they should be left and right. They should be singing the same tune. And on the clear, it's obvious. On the HD700, it gets lost because it sounds a little distorted, partly because of that bass guitar when it's playing. And the other reason, I think the more prominent reason, is because that electric guitar that comes in and it overpowers the mids. The electric guitar's volume is substantially louder than what the mids are being presented as. So you lose the character of the vocalists, in my opinion. You just don't hear them. It sounds too muffled because of that. Okay, so let's switch back to the clear. Okay, I've got the clear on my head. I'm going to decrease volume back to -30. And we are now going to Sun by Sleeping at Last. Here we go. The song starts out with soft piano playing and a male vocalist at a very high pitch. I think it's probably a tenor. I'm going to increase the volume because -30 is a little too quiet for this song. I'm going to go to -25. -25, good listening volume where you can just sit there and relax. I can hear the piano playing. His vocal, the primary vocalist's voice is crystal clear, comes out ahead of the piano. I'm going to increase to -20. And now there's this high-pitched instrument It could be the higher pitch keys on the piano, I can't tell, but if that's on the left ear cup, the vocalist is dead center. The piano sounds like it's about 5 to 10 feet behind the vocalist on this soundstage. And now we have some string instrument coming in. Now you have the drum ramping up, and you get this drum beat at the background. It just comes in, that's the emphasis, dum, 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 very fast transients. There's good soundstage. In fact, there's great separation left and right because you have some instruments on the left ear cup, you have some other instruments on the right ear cup, but the vocalist is dead center. So what you get is this kind of this holographic 3D effect where you hear the vocalist very clearly, and when he's not singing, you can hear one side of the ear cup with one particular instrument a little bit louder than the other instrument, which is on the right ear cup. Those two frequencies don't blend. It doesn't sound like one instrument. Instead, it sounds like two different instruments playing at different volumes, different sides of your head. The vocalist is absolutely smooth, clear, no distortion, no harshness. I'm going to increase to -15. And right now in the song, let's stop for a second. Let's go back to about 2 minutes and 10 seconds. There's a brief moment of silence, and then it's a pause in the song, and then he comes back, testify. And when he says testify, you have this drum, dum, 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 right? Testify, dum, dum, dum at the same time, and you also have the piano come in, and you also have the string instrument come in. When that happens, the vocalist is absolutely crystal clear. None of the other instruments overpower him. It's as if it was so perfectly tuned, so perfectly mastered, that these instruments were in a separate room from the vocalist, and they were recorded separately. And the recording artist brought these different recording files, and then he layered them into the mix so that he could have fine-tuned control. That is how it sounds. That's how good the hardline separation is between the instruments and the vocalist. So let's start at 210 and keep going and make sure that that's exactly what we heard. Yep, testify, and you hear the drum, incredibly fast transients. There's no reverberation, and then you have the piano and the string instruments. He's still crystal clear. That's not easy to do. It's many very good headphones, many very pricey headphones fall quite short of the mark in this type of scenario. But the clears tend to display the vocals once again very clearly. So let's switch to the HD700. I've got the 700 on my head, and let's restart. Here we bring down the volume to -30. And the reason we go back to -30 every time is to make sure that the volume difference is not just because of a particular song or a particular mix. It's the volume difference actually does exist. So we're back at -30, and here we go. Yeah, the volume difference is obviously different. He sounds not muted, but he could use at least 5 additional decibels. So I'm going to bring it up to -25. -25 is basically where the clears were at -30, so I'm going to increase to -15 and just skip all the other middle stuff. There we go. -15 is where the vocals were about -20. So far, the piano sounds very clear. In fact, I would say that the piano frequency sounds more wide. The sound stage is wider on the 700 than on the clear for this song. It seems to be a noticeable difference. It's not giant, but there seems to be a bit more difference, a little bit more sound stage. The vocals come out clear, but there's also a hint of additional treble energy with the 700 that wasn't quite present with the clear. Now you have the drum coming in. Drum is very tight. It's less emphasized than it was on the clear. The drum and the bass frequency for the 700 is, I think, more rolled off than on the clear. There's no harshness at all to the vocalist. I'm going to increase the volume to -10. And at -10, I can clearly hear the vocalist and the piano. The piano's in the right ear cup. He is dead center, the vocalist is. Now, I was hearing a bit more 3D effect, if you went, as I said, with the clear than I am with the 700. It doesn't quite sound holographic, 3D, like it's all around me. It just sounds left and right. There's not much verticality. There's not a whole lot of depth. So what I mean by verticality and depth, so essentially what it means is you're playing a song, you have your headphones on, and there are some instruments that sound like they're playing from above you down to you, right? Almost like you have for example, a trumpet player, 10 feet above you, strapped to the ceiling, and he's playing down on you, right? That's an exaggeration, but you kind of understand. That's verticality. That's coming from above you. Depth is something that's behind you, right? Now, there's a lot of headphones that fake depth by muting certain frequencies. And so they think, the manufacturers think that if we kind of make a U shape on this very, very narrow frequency, that it sounds holographic, that it sounds like there's depth to the song. When a singer has this frequency, it sounds like, oh my goodness, they sound further back apart. That's faking it. I mean, sometimes it's really good, but it's faking it. The HD700 doesn't fake anything. I just don't get any depth. The clear tended to have a better presentation of where the piano was, for example. It's not just left ear cup, but it's left ear cup and further back, as I said. And I think I said that the piano sounds like it's 5 to 10 feet behind on the soundstage, behind the primary vocalist. Whereas with the HD700, I don't really get that effect. Instead, what I hear, what I sense, is that the piano is fairly close to the vocalist, like almost standing shoulder to shoulder, like you're at a nightclub and the singer's standing right there next to the pianist as he's playing and they're singing. It's not the same experience. Let's go back to 210 where we heard the testify and the drum comes in dum dum dum, and let's test if the experience is the same as it was with the clear. Here we go. There's this pause here. And here's the mix. Testify. Let me go back again. I'm going to switch back to the clear to listen to that. Okay, got the clear in my head. Here we go. Now, there's a slight difference. In fact, it's very close, but there's. So here's what the clear does that the HD700 can't at this portion at 2 minutes 10 seconds when he goes testify and dum 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 with the drum. The clear's presentation of the mids is a little bit more forward than it is with the HD700. In fact, I would say that the mids on the clear is. And we're maybe splitting hairs, but it's about a step ahead than what the HD700 presented. And it's a tiny bit clearer. And this is odd to me because the bass on the clear is a little bit more elevated than it is on the HD700. So I would think, at least for that reason, that the mids would be more easily present, more easily heard on the 700 than on the clear, but that's not the presentation I'm getting. It's not a huge difference at this portion, but if you do the A/B test, I think most people would probably say that the clear do present the mids, the vocalist, a little bit cleaner, a little bit clearer, and a little bit more forward, just a tiny, tiny bit. Okay, so now let's go to our last song, Tomorrow by Daughter. We're going to come back down to -30. We have the clear on our head. And here we go. I assume I'm supposed to be hearing something, and I'm not just yet. There we go. It was a very slow build-up. I currently hear a string instrument, and now there's what I want to say is probably a guitar just strumming, an acoustic guitar strumming. I'm going to increase the volume to -20. There's a lot of ambient noise that's mixed into this song, and it just sounds like it's everywhere around me, all around my ears. The female vocalist is very smooth, clear. The multiple string instruments are not harsh. They don't overpower her voice. I'm going to increase to -15. Even at -15, she doesn't sound harsh at all. In fact, the interesting presentation is that there's a bit of energy to her voice. It could be harsh and it could be sibilant, but the clear do not present any sibilance at all for her. And the only elements that we have is this ambience, these ambient sounds, the string instruments, and her vocals. And it's presented very cleanly, distinctly. So the ambient noises don't mix in with her vocal. She's clearly audible. The string instruments don't overpower her. And now you have this kind of this big barrel drum type of thing. I think it's probably the kick drum that is just being played softly for emphasis. And it's almost like that drum, that kick drum, is somewhere else. It's like it's in a different room, and they record it and now they mix it in, and it sounds totally separate from her voice. There is absolutely no interaction between the drum and her voice. It is the best hardline separation between one frequency and another that I have, to my recollection, ever heard. That the kick drum, even though it's got that kind of this beefy, thick sound signature, it in no way affects her voice. It's a very interesting separation. It's almost like I'm not even hearing the kick drum here in the song. It's like there might be a kick drum behind me, and it's like, is there a kick drum behind me? Somebody playing right behind me in real life? No. It's a, like I said, very interesting experience. Okay, so let's bring it back down to -30. And let's go to the 700. Okay, I've got the 700 ready, and here we go. And once again, we have to wait for 8 seconds for the song to ramp up, for better or worse. It's also very muted, as we've already discovered, so we're going to just jump all the way up to -20. Now, what I want to listen for is if that ambience, the ambient noises sound wider on the 700. And I say that they do. That the 700 has a slightly wider soundstage. In fact, the reverberation and the fading of the ambient noises takes a little bit longer. It fades just a little bit longer than it did on the clear. Her voice is clear. The string instruments are not overpowering it, but it's also fairly low volume even even at negative 20. So I'm going to bring it up to negative 10. Okay, we're at negative 10. And I can hear a little bit of sibilance in her voice. That sibilance will start coming in. It's not quite ear-piercing. It's just under the threshold, at least for me. In comparison, the clear, I mean, a very loud volume, I couldn't hear any sibilance in her voice. But with the 700, there's a bit more of that sparkle, a little bit more energy. There's good separation of the instruments. I hear the acoustic guitar in the right ear cup. She's dead center. And then I hear the ambience and the ambiotic. I don't want to keep saying ambiotic. The ambient noises on the left ear cup. Good separation, good depth. And it's that, it feels almost like that some of the instruments are right behind me, just a little bit. Fairly close to what the clear presented. I don't think that the kick drum is presented the same way, though. So if we go back to about 2 minutes 8 seconds, I'm going to listen to the kick drum and her voice. Yeah, it's definitely not the same presentation because the kick drum for the 700, it doesn't overpower her voice, but it does start to kind of bump shoulders with the mids just a little bit because her voice is not as clear, it's not as obvious, it's not as forward as it was on the Focal. And it's not a night and day difference, but it is noticeable. When you do an A and B test, you can tell that the mids certainly are not as forward as on the clear. Other than that, the harshness that could be present is just barely controlled on the 700. Some people might say, it's a little too sparkly for me. My personal opinion is that it's not quite to my threshold, but I can definitely hear the energy in the treble from her voice that I couldn't hear on the clear. So that's kind of, that's kind of a difference. Okay, so let's talk about conclusions. The HD700, I think, goes for $700 or $800, something like that. Brand new as MSRP. You can usually find the 700, I think, for about $400 used on eBay. And I really like the 700 because 700 does have this ability to present a slightly wider soundstage, and for some songs it provides this ethereal experience. In other words, it sounds, because of the wider soundstage, it almost sounds like you are outside someplace. Whereas a headphone like the Clear, which is open back, I know, but it doesn't really sound like a true open back. And a true open back has wider soundstage. At least that's what we imagine. And when you try to put this into words, I would say that the Clear sounds more closed back than it does open back, whereas the HD700 sounds more open back than it does closed back. So that's one big difference between the two. The other big difference is that the Clear, despite having a slightly smaller soundstage and sounding a little bit more closed off than the 700, the Clear's presentation of the mids is, in my opinion, more forward. The separation of the vocalists was noticeably better with multiple vocalists. The presentation of a singular vocalist while other instruments are playing is more forward on the Clear than it is on the HD700. I would say the HD700's ability to kind of muddy the sound a little bit in the mids and kind of make it, for some people, make the mids a little bit too harsh for the treble, might be a turnoff for some. The Clear, on the other hand, I don't hear the treble, which may also be a turnoff for some people. And I really don't have the same bass experience. Now, remember I said that the bass seems to be kind of brushing shoulders with the mids, with the 700. Now, some might say, "Oh, well, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound like a good thing." I wouldn't say that. That's not what I mean. I'm just telling you what I hear. I mean, if you go to a live performance, you're not going to get the experience like the drummer is in a different room and the pianist is in a different room and the vocalist is right in front of you. That's not how it's presented. And so in a live performance, all those frequencies are constantly melding and you're constantly getting distortion for various reasons. So it's not quite the realistic experience as in a live performance on the clear. It just, that hardline separation that's present is frankly amazing if you've never heard it before, but it's not quite realistic. The 700, if you're going for, quote, realism, is probably closer to realism than the clear. But if you're looking for mids that are upfront, undistorted, they don't induce treble fatigue, and they have good separation, excellent separation, really, between the mids and the bass, that the clear, I think, does a better job at all those things than the HD700 for all the reasons that we've just talked about. I hope that this has been of some help to anybody who's been considering either of these two headphones. And, you know, the price difference is very big. You're talking about the clear, which is double the price, versus the HD700, which is not particularly well received by a lot of Sennheiser fans, but they're really good headphones for what they do. They're very, very good headphones. But whether or not you want to pay MSRP for either of these is a separate issue. If you've enjoyed this content, if you enjoy any of my other content, I hope that you might consider donating a couple of bucks to me per month on Patreon. Even $2 a month would help me save money so that I can continue to buy new and old gear and to review it thoroughly for you so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not you need to you need to invest your money in new audio gear. My channel also tries to debunk some pseudo-audiophile myths. We talk about components, we talk about manufacturers, and we try to bring you the truth as best as we can. So if you want to join Patreon and join the family and help us continue to do this work, I would truly appreciate it. If you are not a subscriber, but you watch my channel, hey, please consider subscribing. We are well past my 750 mark goal. We are over 760, so thank you to everybody for contributing and clicking on the subscribe and watching and commenting. That's really all because of you, so thank you so much. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you want me to review a product, hey, there's a product review form, a request form in the description below. Click on it, read it, fill it out, submit it. I'll get to your request as soon as I can. I'm very much backlogged, but I promise to get to it if I have the equipment. I hope all of you have a wonderful, amazing night, and we will talk again soon. Take care.